Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight on this Tuesday, July 23rd.
When we see dollar signs or revenue, we need to remember that it's real people behind those numbers.
Chicago lightens up on late fees and fines. Where should a Chicago casino go? Aldermen are here to weigh in on that and more.
Our winning design is so flexible in nature, it allows you to really grow with the home grows with you, if you will.
Turning vacant lots into an adaptable house for the 21st century homeowner. Looking ahead to what Chicago and the region will look like in 30 years.
These are very large structures, miles on end, and they hold 1 million people or more each. This would be an incredible civilization.
50 years after Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon, we talked to two experts about the future for humans in space.
The breadth of what we see is amazing.
The art of art conservation, including how to rejuvenate this 18th century Chinese treasure.
Don't freeze.
I never freeze.
And Wakanda Con, an Afro-futuristic celebration inspired by the blockbuster hit movie Black Panther, returns to Chicago this weekend. All that and more next on Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Paris Schutz. Here's some of what's making news in Chicago tonight. One day after a committee vote was postponed, a newly revised Fair Workweek ordinance gets the green light from aldermen. Today, the Committee on Workforce Development and Audit passed the plan that would force larger Chicago businesses to give employees a 10-day heads up on their work schedule or else pay them extra. So starting in 2022, companies would have to give a 14-day notice. Now, the workplace protections would apply to salaried workers earning $50,000 or less and hourly workers earning $26 an hour or less. But an employer and employee can agree in writing to forego these new restrictions. The full council is scheduled to vote on this tomorrow. As the nation debates immigration policy, the agency in charge of Border Patrol is holding a conference in Chicago. It's being held at the Marriott Marquis near McCormick Place, although a spokesperson for U.S. Customs and Border Patrol says that the meeting is squarely about international trade. Nevertheless, it prompted dozens of protesters to let their feelings be known about immigration. Specifically, they're calling for the abolishment of immigration and customs enforcement, and they're upset that Marriott is hosting this conference.
By hosting this, Marriott is saying, we're okay with what's happening in our country right now. We're okay with the fact that there's concentration camps at our border. They're allowing this symposium to continue. And like we said, they're not the only ones.
In a statement, a CBP spokesperson says, quote, U.S. Customs and Border Protection's mission is not just about securing the border. The annual trade symposium is a way to bring together the international trade industry and government to ensure that we are meeting the needs of trade while being able to effectively enforce trade laws and regulations. And Marriott, in a statement, said it had a, quote, welcome all policy for groups that want to hold events there, but it in no way means that the company endorses any group's particular views. And Governor J.B. Pritzker signs bills strengthening protections for children of undocumented immigrants, calling Illinois a firewall against Trump. The governor approved laws that would create paths to citizenship for undocumented children who have experienced trauma. The bills would also grant undocumented children 2 years of legal guardianship in the case that their parents are deported. Pritzker says it was no coincidence that these actions were taking place the same day of the Customs and Border Protection Conference.
I think it's appropriate that we're signing these bills on this day when they're here in town, because Illinois is a welcoming state and will always be, and these bills are just two examples of how we are making it more welcoming and the most welcoming state in the United States.
Trouble today for DePaul University's men's basketball team. Head coach Dave Leto has been suspended for 3 games, and the program has been put on a 3-year probation by the NCAA. This because the NCAA says Leto didn't do anything to stop recruiting violations from happening under his watch. The NCAA says a former DePaul associate head coach directed another former staffer to provide impermissible benefits to a player that the school was recruiting. The NCAA says DePaul staff knew that this was a violation and did not report it. As for the weather, a chance of showers and thunderstorms before 10 o'clock tonight. Otherwise, partly cloudy with a low around 62, and then sunny tomorrow with a high near 82. Well, getting a parking ticket is an annoying part of city life for most Chicago residents and visitors, but for some people it can be life-altering. Chicago Tonight's Amanda Vinicki is here with news on proposed changes to the system advocated for by both Mayor Lightfoot and City Clerk Ana Valencia. Amanda, what are these changes about?
Paris, Chicago literally counts on drivers like you and I to mess up, with revenue from vehicle-related fines and penalties making up more than 9% of the city budget.
Chicago's revenues from fines and penalties like parking tickets, red light and speed camera tickets, and building code violations have increased steadily from $257.5 million in 2008. Are you ready for this number? To $344.9 million in 2017.
Yes, for some people, those fines are a mere nuisance, but Mayor Lori Lightfoot says Cook County residents lead the nation in Chapter 13, or so-called wage earners bankruptcy. The bulk of them, 2/3, owe vehicle debt to the city. Another stat, the mayor says some 70,000 drivers have had their driver's licenses suspended, in part because they're overdue on paying Chicago vehicle-related fines.
Think about the ripple effect that creates for a moment. Without a license, a person often can't get a job. If they have a job, it makes it harder to keep the job, especially if they don't have access to easy transportation. Of course, actions should have consequences, we all know that, but mistakes should never result in financial catastrophe.
Amanda, this is an issue that's been around for a while, so what is Mayor Lightfoot proposing?
The power of journalism here, Paris. The mayor and city clerk Ana Valencia both credit a report by ProPublica and WBEZ for really bringing this issue to light and highlighting how this has especially impacted minority communities. The clerk's office has been taking a hard look at the issue since.
As government, we must be and have to be reflective about our past practices and be okay with thinking differently and critiquing our previous policies. We also realized we needed to reframe our thinking. What if people weren't trying to skirt the law, but simply couldn't comply with it in the first place?
Valencia and the mayor are backing an ordinance set to be introduced tomorrow. Among the changes, Chicago will no longer have the state suspend driver's licenses for non-moving violations, like not paying parking or red light tickets. The city will stop ticketing people multiple times on the same day or 2 days in a row, I've had that happen, for not having a current city sticker. Essentially, this will give vehicle owners time to buy a sticker before racking up multiple tickets and fines. Now, the fine for not renewing an $88 annual sticker on time, that'll be capped off at $250. Now that fine can reach $400. Car owners can also request an extra day to either pay their fines or to get started on a payment plan after getting the notorious boot that renders vehicles immobile. Right now, a car is towed 24 hours after getting booted. The city will create a 6-month payment plan meant to make it easier for folks to pay off those vehicle fine debts. Those with proven financial hardships can get extra time. If all goes as planned, the city council will pass this ordinance in November.
Amanda,
in September, Paris. Sorry about that.
Amanda, there's a lot of money here at stake that the city relies upon from these tickets and fines. So how's this going to affect the city's finances?
The city clerk, because the structure now can be so prohibitive that Chicago's already missing out on money.
We need to think critically about how we came to this point. Is it because people don't want to pay, or is it because they can't? As your local government, it's our responsibility to make sure that we are balancing our books in a fair and equitable way. And because of the difficulties and barriers our residents face due to the lack of options, this is revenue we're not even collecting. It's revenue we're not going to ever see.
Mayor Lightfoot says she hopes that with a grace period offering, also that payment plan option that drivers are going to pay up, she predicts then that this will be revenue neutral in due time. Now, who knows how much of that is wishful thinking, considering, of course, the tough budget decisions she's got ahead. Regardless, both Lightfoot and Valencia say this is just the first of what they expect will be many changes. Now, no matter what Chicago does, barring a change in state law, there's no apparent way for those who've already had their driver's licenses suspended to get them back until they pay off all of those fines. There is a measure before the General Assembly that would remove Illinois' ability to suspend driver's licenses for failure to pay these non-moving municipal violations. That did pass the Senate, but stalled in the House.
All right, Amanda, thank you very much. And up next, where will Chicago put its first casino? Aldermen weigh in on that and much more.
This evening's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by ComEd, powering lives.
We have a tremendous source of untapped, efficient energy right here in our school. Let her rip, Jenny.
I kind of love this idea.
The ComEd Energy Efficiency Program has real ideas for making schools energy efficient.
Pedal faster.
It's a question that's likely to be repeated a lot over the next several months. Where should a Chicago casino go? Already 2 aldermen have stepped forward to say, not my ward. So are there other aldermen that want it? We'll ask some of them about this and other pressing city council news, including a new round of ethics reforms and a big change to city labor law. And joining us are 36th Ward Alderman Gilbert Villegas, Alderman Nicholas Spazzato of the 38th Ward, and 28th Ward Alderman Jason Irvin. Welcome all of you back to Chicago tonight.
Thank you for having us.
All right, Alderman Irvin, a few of your colleagues have nixed casinos in your ward. What about in their wards? What about your ward?
The areas that have been selected, my ward was not one of the sites that were selected to be studied. But again, I'm interested in what's going to be best for the city overall, because we do need revenue. And if we're looking more toward trying to create some revenue and an equitable stream of revenue, we need to put the casino where it will best suit that.
All right, let's look at some of those sites. We have a map of them. There's 5 largely on the south side and on the west side. Nick Spazzato, are these the right places to be looking?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not the person checking them out. I mean, and this could change too. Right now, these are the places being checked out. You could put me down as a 3rd alderman that doesn't want the casino in his ward, so I don't think my ward's a likely target. But I'm like Alderman Irvin says, whatever's going to be best for the city, we can get the most revenue out of it. And that I guess would be the old post office or McCormick Place.
So the old post office, McCormick Place, 2 sites that aren't on that map, but Mayor Lightfoot has not ruled out other spots just because they didn't make that list of 5, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think the study is going to be ongoing, and I think that Springfield gave a deadline of August 27th or something like that. So I think it's going to be important to kind of do this study and kind of find out what was financially feasible or not.
And Alderman Villegas, what do you need to see from this study to support the Chicago casino?
Well, I think we need to not lose sight of who is the intended user of the casino. In my opinion, I think the 50+ million people that come to Chicago should be the target. We shouldn't be, in my opinion, we shouldn't be putting it too far away from where the tourists come. I think that we want to target these tourists, and I think a good place that I think would be with the Central Business District, and take a look at the existing hotels and put some casinos and slots in those buildings.
And there's a few things the city wants out of casino. First, the revenue, but second, economic development. Alderman Irvin, is it right to look at a casino as an economic development tool for an underdeveloped neighborhood?
I mean, it can be used as an economic development tool. The one thing I think we have to caution ourselves against is it becoming an island. And when I say becoming an island, is that everything is drawn into it and it does nothing to enhance the area in which it's put in. So that's the one concern that I have. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it works. The community is supportive of it. And again, some of our colleagues have said they do not want it in their communities, and I understand and can support them on that. But we do want something that's going to draw the benefits, not just toward the casino, but it has to bring neighborhood benefits if it's going to be placed in a neighborhood.
Are you worried about low-income residents depositing all their money in casino instead of spending it on other things?
I'm definitely concerned about that. Again, many people think of gaming. Gaming, it doesn't generally create wealth, it transfers wealth.
because it doesn't, you play, you win, you get it, you lose, they get it. So we're not creating anything here. We're just transferring dollars back and forth. And generally the odds are stacked in the favor of the house. So we want to make sure that whatever is going to occur, it has to bring some additional benefits. It's going to create economic development, bring greater public safety to our communities, invest in our infrastructure, and create a system and create dollars that are going to help educate our children.
Alderman Sposato, how much of an economic benefit do you think the city will see once it selects a site for a casino?
Yeah, that I can't answer. I don't have the answer to that question. I don't think anybody does. But like Alderman Villegas says, we want to attract tourism with it, and that should be our main target.
So it seems like the consensus here, you'd rather see tourists spend their money there than locals.
I'd rather see our communities get jobs, have the opportunity for contracts, have the economic opportunity without necessarily being the ones that are drawn into the casino to do the gaming and do the betting.
All right, Alderman Villegas, on another topic, there's going to be a vote on a new round of ethics proposals tomorrow. Can you tell us what those are?
Well, I think it's some definitions regarding outside employment, also the expansion of the definition of lobbyist. I think I've heard some concerns about the expansion of lobbyists, about not-for-profits. They're concerned as they're talking to elected officials. What's going to really clarify what a lobbyist discussion or if they have to register or not. So I think there's a lot of issues that are going to be out there, but I think that we're going to support this initiative because it's the right thing to do now.
So outside jobs, basically saying someone who's a property tax appeal lawyer cannot also be an alderman, or an alderman cannot do that, a.k.a. Ed Burke, correct?
That's correct.
Well, he has a firm, though. I mean, does it mean he has to divest of his firm where other lawyers there do the property tax work?
I think I'm waiting to see how that's going to be spelled out. I think that the attorneys and ethics are still going to have to rule on that. So that I'm not sure about.
Alderman Sposato, do these ethics reforms go far enough?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's a step, maybe in the right direction. I have some issues with a few things. Certainly, I don't think one of the things I think we need to look at is, and I know we can't say it, it has to be state law or something, but term limits, certainly at least one thing we can do is term limits on committees. So that's something would be no problem for us to implement.
Term limits on chairmanship for committees.
Correct, yeah, I'm sorry, not to be on a committee, but to be a chairman of a committee.
Alderman Irvin, are these proposals going to help clean up what's seen as a culture of corruption?
I think it will deal with some of the conflicts that have drawn most of the recent news when you have individuals that are seeking to potentially gain personally from their actions. So by eliminating those avenues for individuals to do that, it will help that situation.
Is anyone, speaking of individuals sort of caught up in some problems, anyone spoken with Alderman Carrie Austin?
No.
I have not.
I've spoken to her.
You've spoken to
Yeah.
her? Does she have any response to what's happening? Because she hasn't talked to the media very much.
No, I mean, she doesn't have a response as it pertains to the situation. I just spoke to her just to make sure that she was doing fine and she was okay. But beyond that, didn't have any other discussion.
All right, let's talk about another item coming tomorrow, the Fair Work Week ordinance, which we mentioned just passed the committee. Is there any concern, Alderman Villegas, that this could hurt businesses that need to bring people in at the last minute to work?
Well, you know what? I tell you that when this started about 2.5 years ago, everyone was on the opposite side. What you've seen in the last probably 2 months or last month is that you've seen all the interest groups come to the table, discuss what it is they can live with, and I think that what you're going to see tomorrow, what you saw today, was an agreed upon ordinance that you've seen some of the larger employers drop their opposition to, and I think this is a good step. We're going to reevaluate this in a year. Also, we still have the promulgation of rules that's going to occur, so we'll kind of get deep in the weeds with some of those legislation, some of the language that we have to put in there.
So, Alderman Sposato, has this ordinance been revised enough to sort of make it palatable to all sides?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, all the parties came together, and I really think it's more like in the last week it really came together rather than the last 2 months. I mean, so I was glad to see that happen. People were pulling on all of us from all sides, and I'm glad to see everybody come to a compromise. I'm not so sure that this is legal. Being in a border ward, it's certainly something that could affect my ward. But
in what way would it not be legal?
Well, maybe. Well, I just can't imagine that we could tell people, how you're gonna manage your people. I mean, I'm not an attorney. I do impersonate one every once in a while, but I just can't believe we could tell businesses how to run their scheduling. So,
Alderman Irvin, what about the concerns of safety net hospitals that say, well, you're going to penalize us. We need to bring in doctors or nurses or staff at the last minute, depending on what the emergency is.
Well, I think everyone needs to begin planning. All of this goes down to proper planning. You know, as they say, I won't say this, but it basically says that poor planning equals poor performance. So when people begin to plan, it will force people to plan better, look at their operations and figure out the ebbs and flows of them and plan accordingly. If they choose not to, then they can pay the penalty and continue to move on. If it works in their business model, they can do that. But most businesses are running at a point where they're trying to be as lean as possible. However, it's put the workers at a disadvantage by having to sit by the phone, wait to be on call, or come to work and be told to go home. That's not fair to do.
So this is a game changer for workers that
without
needs some
question.
stability.
And that's the key. I think it creates the stability that people are looking for, but it also creates, in my opinion, creates stability also for the employer because they will be looking to do some better planning for their operations.
All right, quickly on the subject of crime and violence, I want to go down the line here. Alderman Lightfoot has supported Superintendent of Police Eddie Johnson, but she's kind of qualified that support a little bit. Alderman Villegas, do you think his job is safe?
I think so. I think he's doing a great job. When you talk with the rank and file, I mean, that's the type of superintendent that they want and they like, and that's the type of superintendent that they can work really hard for. And I think that when you're looking at the amount of overtime that's being done, these men and women are working real hard.
Alderman Sposato, you're close with police. Are they happy with Eddie Johnson?
Close with Eddie Johnson also, and you know where I stand on this. It doesn't help the situation when electeds start criticizing our mayor and our superintendent.
And very quickly, Alderman Irvin.
I think Superintendent Johnson is doing a good job. Again, we have a new administration, and we'll wait to see what the mayor decides to do.
All right. My thanks to all of you, Gilbert Villegas, Nick Sposato, Jason Irvin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And there is more Chicago Tonight just ahead, so please stay with us. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, what the top planning priorities are for the region over the next 30 years amid the challenges of population loss and climate change. Humankind's future in space. Could Jeff Bezos' vision of giant rotating habitats one day support millions of people living in space? Restoring artwork and treasures from Imperial China at a Chicago conservation lab. And a look at the Black Panther-inspired convention, WakandaCon, coming to Chicago this weekend. But first, there's a shortage of affordable apartments and available starter homes across many Chicago neighborhoods. Earlier this year, DePaul's Institute for Housing Studies reported the loss of some 14,000 units in 2 to 4 flat buildings. Likewise, housing analysts say middle-income buyers face steep hurdles in finding a home, especially a new construction home. As Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg reports, a recently completed design challenge aims to tackle some of those issues with a concept adaptable to different users and different neighborhoods.
Consider the bungalow. The modest but mighty home was for years the backbone of middle-income, single-family housing stock in many Chicago neighborhoods. So the organizers of the Disruptive Design Challenge used it as something of an organizing principle, putting out calls to architects for a 21st century bungalow.
The cost of new construction is so high that we're not seeing starter homes, we're not seeing affordable single-family homes being built. In Chicago, we have a unique opportunity. We have thousands of vacant lots owned by the city of Chicago, and it presents an opportunity to create affordable housing and make an incentive for middle-income families, working families, to stay here in the city and not move away, move to the suburbs.
The organizers of the Disruptive Design competition reached out to the American Institute of Architects for help. They got 130 different entries, eventually whittled down by a jury to the winner, Greg Tamburino's Adaptable House.
It can accommodate a variety of different uses. So it might be a single person that lives on one floor and rents the upstairs, or it might be a small family that lives upstairs where there's more room and rents out the lower floor. Accommodating in terms of being able to house someone that might be wheelchair bound or elderly and aging in place.
And the house isn't just meant to work for different kinds of owners, it's also adaptable to neighborhood-level needs. 2 vacant city-owned plots are slated as sites for the first 2 of these designs to become reality. In West Humboldt Park, contest organizers say local Alderman Walter Burnett hopes to bring in middle-income residents that'll attract new business development. In Alderman Pat Dowell's swath of Bronzeville, organizers say it's meant to help stabilize an area with housing prices that have been spiking dramatically. Jeff Smith of DePaul's Institute for Housing Studies says ideas like the adaptable house are a valuable strategy to attack part of Chicago's affordable housing crunch.
I think it's a really exciting and innovative competition that hopefully can be replicated across the city and produce new affordable for sale housing for middle-income families. But that doesn't solve the challenge of, we've got a lot of folks in the neighborhood who are earning, less than $35,000 a year, less than $25,000 a year, who are struggling to find affordable rental housing. It's a separate challenge, and we kind of need to address it with other strategies.
And with more and more higher-income families choosing to live and buy in the city, Smith says the solution can't only be left up to developers.
If you just leave it in the hands of developers, you'll just develop expensive housing, basically. That's because they want to make money. Unless you give them some incentive, that's the government providing some incentive to produce affordable housing, they won't.
While you might not get jazzed about zoning changes to allow basement units or how to best implement the city's affordable requirements ordinance, Smith says the varied problems in the housing and rental markets require varied solutions, including ideas like the disruptive design concept.
We need to think about repopulating Chicago's south and west sides, and I think this is one way to do it. I'm not saying this is the only way, but when you think about architecture, when you think about design, doing it in a way that's respectful, that's aesthetically pleasing, in a way that folks can say, I'm proud to live here, I'm proud to be a homeowner, where neighbors are happy to live next to this really cool design, that's what matters.
Architects got feedback from area residents throughout the project. Tamburino says his plan is meant to be sustainable, offer a connection to the outdoors, and be affordable through an efficient floor plan and, hopefully, through economy of scale.
Highly replicable design, maybe portions of it that could be mass-produced. So they are building 2 starter homes, with the idea that you could build hundreds, if not thousands of these all over Chicago or in any place, really.
The major developer, Related Midwest, is committed to build the first 2 houses once Disruptive Design's organizers have secured the funding.
It's one thing to create an innovative and beautiful design, which we have in our winter, and we're so excited. But now we're really going through every single cost in our budget and figuring out how we can get this built for the price. There's still work to do, but we're very close.
The plan is to break ground within the next year. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
And you can see the other finalists and all the design entries on our website. Well, what will the Chicago region look like in 30 years? Our next guest doesn't have a crystal ball, but she has a pretty good idea of what public officials may want to focus on. She just assumed the job of leader of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, and that's an agency that looks ahead at the region's future by focusing on transportation, housing, economic growth, open spaces, the environment, and more. The agency's latest report is called On to 2050. And here to tell us what lies ahead over the next 3 decades for this 7-county region known as the Chicago area is Erin Ailman, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning's new executive director. She is the first professional planner and the first woman to lead CMAP. Welcome to Chicago Tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's your second week on the job, so as we discussed before, you have all the answers ready to go.
Absolutely, all the answers.
All right, first a primer, what is CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning?
Sure, so we're the region's planning agency. We're federally mandated but state funded, and we represent 7 counties here in northeastern Illinois, 284 municipalities, and we really work with communities on consensus to help them achieve their goals.
So you work with the 7 counties in the region, you get funding from them and from the state. CMAP has been pitching this Go to 2050 plan to envision the Chicago region in 2050. So in a nutshell, what does that plan entail?
Yeah, the plan's really focused on 3 core themes: inclusive growth, prioritized investment, and really making our region more resilient.
To climate change?
To climate change, yeah.
Okay, so I want to bring up climate change. What are the sort of threats to the region from climate change?
Yeah, well, as we see more extreme weather events, it really impacts our infrastructure. And if you aren't pre-planning for that, it really takes decades to build infrastructure in the region. It can have devastating impacts on the region, like more flooding, it really hurts homeowners. So we've been trying to think proactively about how to engage communities in these conversations about, really making the upfront investment in a time of limited resources.
And we've seen a lot of flooding this year from a wet spring. We have a map of the most flood-prone areas of the region, and that map is going to show that the city of Chicago right there, the darkest blue basically means that's where the highest threat of flooding is. So what does the city have to do to mitigate that?
Yeah, well, that's where the theme of prioritized investment really comes into play here, is that the places where we've seen underinvestment in terms of infrastructure, in terms of housing and social services, are places where we are seeing a lot of flooding. So as we see the region grow, we want to make sure that those services are being thought about equitably across the region, and that we're thinking about communities that have been disinvested in because they are seeing high impacts related to climate change.
I read somewhere that people predict that Chicago's climate could be akin to like Baton Rouge, Louisiana by some point in this century. Is that what the region's going to feel like then?
Well, I certainly hope not. I mean, I think we have a great strategic advantage here with the Great Lakes out front, and as we think about how we use our water, how we invest our transportation dollars, how we invest our limited resources for new housing, and think about how we build communities, we want to be thinking about those things holistically and comprehensively. And I think there's a future where it can be really not that dire.
So one of the things your agency is saying that we shouldn't be thinking of ourselves as Rust Belt, but we should be thinking of the region as Water Belt. Explain that.
Yeah, well, I think that is one of the competitive advantages of our region. We have fresh water. It's something that's right outside our front door. Some of the things that we need to do to protect the water resources is really think about upgrading water infrastructure that's leaky, making sure that homes that are being built are up to new, future standards of low water use, and that's really going to help us be competitive.
So the Great Lakes being a giant freshwater source, do you advocate Chicago becoming a center for exporting of water to the rest of the country, for lack of a better phrase?
I think that still sort of remains to be seen. While we're looking out to 2050, we really want to protect our interests here in this part of the region, and pricing water effectively is another tool to really think about how we conserve water as well.
And I think I read in your report that you advocate against private companies coming in and sort of controlling water production and distribution from the Great Lakes.
Well, I think those are really important conversations that our elected officials are going to need to have. And one of the things that's our role as a public agency is really to do the research and analysis and weigh the pros and cons of doing things like that before we make decisions.
How much sway do you have over public officials, say the mayor of Chicago or the county board president?
Yeah, one of the unique things about CMAP is that we have a board that's made up of appointees from the city of Chicago, Cook County, and the collar counties here, and they have to have the supermajority in order to pass things. And we've been really working on consensus and really building sort of that infrastructure of relationships that we have of the elected officials across our region.
Another problem the region faces, especially in Chicago, is population loss. New numbers show that the city's lost about 7,000 residents over the last year. How does the city turn that around?
Yeah, it's something that we've heard the Lightfoot administration talk about, and something that we're really concerned about as planners. As you look at the loss that we've seen, it's really middle and low income African American residents across the city. And so we need to figure out, how we reduce that, how we make sure that we're investing in communities that really need new infrastructure, new transportation infrastructure. Where we're seeing the growth happen is places that have good access to transit, good access to highways. So how can we make sure that as we build and continue to grow our region that we're investing in our existing communities?
So you're saying a way to stem the tide here is spending more money on public transit, parks, infrastructure in underserved communities?
Absolutely. Places and things that people want to have and really improve quality of life. And I think another really important consideration is investing in the communities that are already existing too.
All right, and we're looking at a map here that says the significant transportation project. So what's the future of transportation in this region?
Yeah, we have spent a lot of time thinking about what the future of transportation is going to be like in this region. And we want it to be more multimodal, more interconnected, and we want to make sure that the assets that we have, the roads and bridges that we have, are maintained in a good, modern condition as well. So, less about expanding in new projects and more about making sure that we're maintaining the infrastructure that we have so that we aren't sort of falling behind our peers. Our transportation is our backbone.
We just saw a story about affordable housing design. How does the city address the lack of affordable housing here for residents?
Yeah, well, it's affordable housing not only in the city of Chicago, but also across the 284 municipalities that we represent. Thinking about where housing can be located strategically around transit access is one great way of reducing costs. The city of Chicago has a transit-oriented development ordinance that reduces the parking requirements for new developments that are by transit, and thereby reducing the cost of building those new housing developments.
So one of the things you advocate for is sort of housing and general sort of clusters of activity around transit centers. Like if you go down Metra in the different suburbs, the downtown area typically tends to be by the Metra stop.
That's right, and I think that's a really productive strategy. Unfortunately, it's not always the way that things happen, and I think we need to think too about congestion on our expressways as well, because I know that for some people it's not an option for them to get on transit. So what else do we need to be doing as planners to help make sure that our economy is competitive, that people can get to work in a reasonable amount of time and not stuck sitting in congestion?
All right, Erin Ailman, best of luck on the new job at CMAP, and we'll follow your work.
Thank you so much. Glad to be on.
All right. So we just discussed the future of the Chicago region. Let's expand this conversation to include the future of outer space. That's up next.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
50 years after Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to set foot on the moon, a new era of space exploration is dawning. China plans to land people on the moon by 2035, while President Donald Trump wants Americans to establish a permanent moon base and send astronauts to Mars. But private billionaires Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have even more grandiose visions for the future. So just what could human exploration of space look like over the next 50 years? Joining us to share their insights are Suzanne Bell, professor at DePaul University, where she studies industrial and organizational psychology. NASA is currently funding Bell to study how to put together the best team to send on long space missions like going to Mars. And Mark Subarao, astronomer at the Adler Planetarium, where he is the director of the Space Visualization Laboratory. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you.
All right, Suzanne Bell, the president says he wants to go back to the moon by 2024. Is this a worthwhile goal?
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. Going back to the moon, sending both a man and a woman to the moon, as well as setting up a situation that will help us eventually get to Mars.
So there still is yet to be the first woman to walk on the moon.
That's right.
Another first there for the moon. Mark Subarao, Suzanne Bell says setting up exploration of Mars. Is Mars within reach in our lifetime in terms of human beings setting foot on Mars?
Oh yes, certainly. There's certain technical challenges because of the length of the mission, because of radiation exposure, but we've sent many robotic missions to Mars, so sending people is certainly something that's possible.
And Suzanne Bell, this is where your research is focusing, like what is it going to do, the psychology of an astronaut, to be in a spaceship for months, if not years, in the size of like a studio apartment with other astronauts. So what has your research found?
Well, that's a very challenging environment, and these teams are going to have to work together seamlessly to do really complicated things with a lot of autonomy. So we found a number of things, but we look at what personalities and values are most compatible. You still want an astronaut with the right stuff, and they still need to be technical experts, but when we're talking about up to 3 years together in a small space, that idea of interpersonal compatibility becomes really important as well.
So this is something that NASA or whatever space agency has to think about when they put a team together. Are they going to get along for 3 years?
That's right. Can they keep conflicts manageable? Can they coordinate seamlessly for things like landing on Mars with a 22-minute delay back to mission control? I mean, it's an amazing feat that a team of 4 will have to do.
When you say 22-minute delay, that means it takes 22 minutes for communication to get back to Earth and vice versa.
That's right. So Orion Mission Control will know if the landing was successful 22 minutes after it's occurred.
All right, Mark Subarow, what about a permanent base on the moon, as the president has said? Is that realistic?
Oh yeah, certainly. I think some estimates I've seen talk about a moon colony costing as little as $20 to $50 billion, which sounds like a lot, but in the scheme of things, it really isn't that much.
It's not even half of Mr. Bezos' personal wealth, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And what is the benefit of this? I mean, if it's going to spend that much money, what are American citizens going to get from this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And you could also say, hey, didn't we do that 50 years ago? Why do we want to do it now? And a good reason is really as part of that stepping stone. So in a lot of in exploration in the past, you know, we've sent people to a place, they've come back, but having a colony where people live for a while gives you that experience to move outwards. And I think really it is true that scientifically, Mars is a more interesting place. It's had a more interesting history. But getting there, the experience we'll have from going to Mars, from the moon, will help us get there.
And Suzanne Bell, does the future of U.S. space exploration rely on working together with countries like Russia and China, who also have big investments in this area?
Absolutely. Both our international collaborators and the commercial providers. Our research, we partner with some people from the Institute of Biomedical Problems, whose research informs the operation for the Russian Space Agency. And the idea is this crew is going to be an international crew that will go to Mars someday, and so we need to really work together and think about how to have complementary methods to support these crews.
So there's no evidence that political differences seep into space work, is there?
I do get a couple jokes when I go to Russia.
Okay.
Political jokes told to me, but other than that, no, the scientists really like to focus on the science.
Mark Subarow, we just talked about Elon Musk, or at the Open we talked about Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Yep. I thought Richard Branson wanted to do something too. So is a large percentage of the future of space exploration in the hands of private billionaires?
It can seem that way, and I think there's this narrative about this transition from space being sort of a public thing that NASA's driven to a private enterprise. But space has always been a public-private partnership. We recently had the celebration for Apollo 50th and had a lot of people who'd worked on NASA at the Adler Planetarium, and you realize many companies were involved in that. So I think in reality it's more of an evolution than a drastic change. I think it's certainly true that you have charismatic billionaires who attract a lot of attention, but because of the upfront investment that's needed, the government's going to continue to play a really important role.
And so to their specific ideas, Musk wants to build I guess a man-made space colony. How realistic is that?
Well, I think you have to differentiate between some of this near-term exploration, where we're talking about Moon and Mars, and really the long-term future of humans in space. There's a different vision there between Bezos and Musk, and Musk talks about people on Mars and terraforming Mars. Bezos' vision is these giant space
And just clarify what terraforming means.
So it's changing Mars so that it's more Earth-like. It probably involves 2 steps. One, warming the planet. We know how to do that. We've been practicing on the Earth for the last 100 years. But then adding oxygen, which is actually a very complicated thing.
Suzanne Bell, is this something that policymakers should be looking at long-term with climate change becoming more of a threat?
To colonize Mars?
Colonize, terraform?
Well, to me, the first step is learning from Mars of why does Mars look like it is now. There were more similarities to Earth than people might realize years ago. And so the first step is I'd like to learn about how to better our planet, and then maybe next step would be to do some of these colonizations.
So there's a lot to learn there's a lot to learn about ourselves by going to Mars.
Absolutely.
Mark Subarow, what about Elon Musk's idea of reusable rockets that could be used, 100 or so times?
Oh yeah, we certainly have to do that. So, Right now, it's just really, really expensive to get anything into orbit. And one way to bring that cost is to reuse all the components.
Speaking of expenses, there's this, I talked about burgeoning industry of leisurely space travel, but only super rich people will ever be able to afford that. Is there any way to bring the cost down for average people to go on a trip like that?
I would think that's the long-term plan. So it is cost-prohibitive right now, but eventually I would like to think that what they'd set up on the moon would be something that'd be more accessible to a broader group of people.
Mark Suber, what about that? Is leisurely space travel going to be happening in our lifetime?
Oh, certainly in our lifetime. And to whom is the big question. And I'm sure for the foreseeable future, it'll be the very rich. Right now,
And we're just talking about like low orbit kind
exactly.
of journeys?
Suborbital flights. You go up, you come back down. You don't necessarily orbit the Earth.
Well, maybe they'll allow reporters to do stories on these new journeys. All right, Suzanne Bell, Mark Subarow, thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
And tonight at 8, you can watch Chasing the Moon, American Experience. And then at 10, go behind the scenes of astronaut Scott Kelly's Year in Space. You can see both of those programs tonight on WTTW. A Chicago company is dedicated to preserving artworks and heirlooms from around the world. We visited the nation's largest private conservation lab for a look at how they are rejuvenating an artful piece of Chinese history. Here's Jay Shefsky with that story.
Birds sculpted from stone, bamboo leaves carved from jade, scenes of China etched in rosewood. These are all facets of an imperial screen given to Emperor Qianlong in the 18th century. Its 10 panels are being meticulously cleaned and preserved to rejuvenate the screen to its former glory.
Sometimes things come in and you say, this is a moment in time that is very special. That piece has been slowly deteriorating since 1791, and of course it was in this incredible museum, but it had a lot of issues.
The screen came from the Lizadro Museum of Lapidary Art. The museum, dedicated to the art of cutting and polishing stone, recently vacated its longtime home in Elmhurst. It will reopen in a larger space in Oakbrook in the fall. When we visited the Conservation Center, this museum treasure had been dismantled, and a team of furniture conservators was midway through a multi-layered treatment.
Right from the get-go, the craftsmanship was excellent, obviously. It was just kind of like you could look at it and go, wow, this is really as good as it gets. I think in terms of Chinese screens, I've worked on a lot of them over the years, but this is definitely the best.
They estimate the project will take more than 600 hours to complete.
It's a big project. There's lots of steps to it. It needs a lot of work. So we have been just working away step by step, just stabilizing, cleaning, replacing areas of loss.
The center's laboratory in Westtown was a collaboration between Studio Gang architects and the conservators themselves.
We have 44 experts trained from all around the world, covering pretty much every art discipline, whether it's furniture or textiles or photography, works of art on paper, gilded artifacts, frames. And it's really a business like this is all about the talent of the people that are here. And things come in from all over the country, whether it's a family heirloom like a book or a letter from a family member, or it could be a major work of art from a museum or a corporation or an institution. I've been here 30 years now, and that is probably one of the best parts of working here, is because every day it's different. You know, you see something come in and someone's telling you the story of why this is important to them and why they cherish it and why they want to have it preserved. And then they sort of hand it over to us as the caretakers, and it goes through this incredible process.
And there is a lot of science involved in the process. An art conservator is accredited and generally has more education than an art restorer. Conservation requires more scientific expertise than restoration. Some jobs are more challenging than others, but a conservator's philosophy could be summed up as less is more.
We're trying to bring a piece back to as close to original condition as we can, but preserving its age, its history, bring it back to where it should be. So it should look like a piece that's been looked after for 200 years, as opposed to look like it's brand new.
You don't want to be aggressive or invasive. You want to use techniques that are 100% reversible, and you want to really honor not only the intent of the artist and the process of the artist, but also the character and life that it's gone through over the last, whether it's a decade or centuries.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Jay Shefsky.
About 2 months of conservation work remains on the Imperial Chinese screen. It will be reinstalled at the new home of the Lizadro Museum of Lapidary Art in the fall. Find out more about the Conservation Center and our museum and the museum on our website. 1 year ago, Marvel's Black Panther took the box office by storm. The film earned more than $1 billion, becoming the second highest grossing film of 2018. Its impact also reached beyond the screen by sparking the creation of the first of its kind WakandaCon, an Afro-futuristic celebration. WakandaCon is space for comic book lovers, pop culture fanatics, and art and tech enthusiasts. It's an opportunity for people of all ages to come together and express themselves in whatever manner they see fit, and it is all taking place this weekend in Chicago. Joining us is Lisa Beasley, a producer for WakandaCon Chicago, and a comic and an actress, as I understand as well.
Yeah.
Lisa, what is the inspiration behind WakandaCon?
Yeah, well, the main inspiration is creating a space. I think a lot of people were inspired by Black Panther and the representation of it all, and we saw that there was a need for the nerd space to be able to have representation. I think when you see most nerd spaces, they're not really as inclusive, so we wanted to create a moment for people to all come together and connect and network about art, technology, community, and creativity.
So you're proudly wearing the label of nerd.
Oh yeah, I'm a nerd. Last year we encouraged people to, whatever you're a nerd about, you could find that at WakandaCon.
And tell me about the connection with Black Panther, the movie.
Well, yeah, so we saw the movie, and the original creator, Dave Barthwell, he went to his sister and said, I want to do WakandaCon. And his sister and I, Allie Barthwell, we worked together before, and she came to me and she said, hey, my brother had this idea called WakandaCon. I said, I know exactly what that is. Yes, we can do it. It was right after the movie had came out, and each of us in the original Founding Five had seen it probably about 30 times between all of us.
Conservative estimate there,
yeah,
right?
I saw it about 12 times.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, and tell me about, first of all, it's sort of a celebration of Afrofuturism. So Afrofuturism combines a lot of different things. Define Afrofuturism for
Yeah,
us.
so there are a lot of notable Afrofuturists that wear the label and like know the world a lot. I would define Afrofuturism as kind of like the intersection between Black culture and science fiction and art and technology. It's reimagining the world through the Black lens.
And you know, as a music fan, Sun Ra, the great jazz artist, he was an Afrofuturist before there was such a thing as Afrofuturism.
Yeah, the term has become like really popular in the last few years, but Octavia Butler, George Clinton, people would recognize them as Afrofuturists.
And so tell us some of the events and the panels that are going to take place this weekend.
Absolutely. So we're going to have a lot of panels. All of our panels are community submitted, a variety of topics. We have a cosplay contest where you can have a beginner, advanced, children's are a term we made up, Afro eleganza, and that's like Afrofuturistic fashions.
So cosplay just means like best costumes, or?
Yep. So people will be able to like dress up or celebrate their culture through whatever they want to wear. We have a creatives corner where people can do a variety of things, and we'll also have a video gaming room. We'll have I Play Games coming back to do a video gaming tournament. A lot of great exciting things going on.
And last year was the first year for this, so how did it go last year?
You know what, it went overwhelmingly great. It was a great turnout. It was a lot of support. People bought tickets before they really knew what it was or what was going on. So it was pretty huge, and it was pretty special too.
So now they know what's going on. Do you have better ticket sales this year?
Yeah, we're doing great. I think the challenge for us is we set a pretty high bar last year. So I think we're feeling pressure to just make it just as great, but we have some awesome partners returning. We have Erica Alexander with Color Farm coming back. We have Fermilab. We're doing a partnership with Adler. So we got a lot of support from the community.
I want to go back to Afrofuturism for a second, because a lot of this is about the African diaspora and envisioning the future of the race. How come space and tech and science became such a part of this?
Well, I mean, Black culture stems from everything, and we're interested in just about everything. And I think when we think about the intersection of space, art, and technology, fusing that with Black culture is where the Afrofuturism part comes in, where sometimes the conversation could be one-sided, but we have our way of looking at it as well. And I think when all of that comes together, that's when you get to see something through the Black lens that you may not have experienced before.
All right, so I want you to give me the thing you're most looking forward to about the conference this week.
Well, one of the things I'm most looking forward to is Time Magazine has launched a immersive app, and you'll be able to watch the moon landing from your phone. So I'm going to walk some people through that experience on their phone. They'll be able to download the app, and you can take a picture and see the moon landing from your phone. So I'm excited to introduce people to that.
Tying in all the themes of tonight's show, space travel, WakandaCon. All right, Lisa Beasley, best of luck with the festival this weekend.
Thank you.
And WakandaCon is this Friday through Sunday at the Hyatt Regency McCormick Place. There's more information on our website. And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also watch via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. The big takeaways from Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's long-awaited congressional testimony, and chalking it up with one of Chicago's most prolific 3D chalk artists. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. I thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, serving Chicago as a personal injury law firm since 1984.